Morning guys, and welcome back. Today I'm going to address the question, what is the ideal KH level in my pond? Now I've done KH and pH videos before, a lot of detail in them, so a lot of this information will be in there. I am going to go into a bit more specific detail. So I'm going to sort of drag out the KH pH balance, the question from that bigger video, so this should be a lot more concise. Hopefully it'll be helpful. As I say, I do get asked this quite a lot. Okay, so what is KH? Essentially, very simplified, it's a measure of carbonate in your pond system. So if often measured in degrees of hardness. For example, you get a reading of 5 degrees, that is a number, that's putting a number on how much carbonate is in your pond water. Why do we need carbonate? Essentially because all the living things in there, so the koi themselves, the filtering your bacteria, they use carbonate. They consume carbonate in order to go about their daily business and survive. And so we need to make sure there's enough carbonate in there all the time for those organisms, living things to use and to survive. The amount of waste that you have in your pond, sat on the bottom, sat in the filters, plants in the detritus, all these things also contribute to carbonate consumption, but predominantly the biggest user is the filter bacteria. So the bacteria in your biological filter are the biggest user of carbonate. Now that in itself is fine. When your system runs out of carbonate, so if they consume more carbonate than is being put in, carbonate or KH reading reaches 0, what happens then? Basically what happens is, again, it's a very simplified version, but what happens is they then start to consume your pH. There is no carbonate, and so they consume pH and your pH drops. So as pH comes down, it becomes more acidic. Low pH, more acidic. So as the pH drops, the efficiency of the filter bacteria is reduced. And I will just interject a little bit. The consistency in a koi pond is absolutely vital. We're trying to manage such a tiny ecosystem, but it's on such a knife edge because of the such tiny volumes. You haven't got that damper of volume and dilution. You're on a knife edge, so consistency in everything you do across koi keeping is absolutely key. With KH, when it's used up, as I say, the pH will start to drop, and pH is probably the single most important parameter in terms of stability, because although koi will adapt to pHs from a little over 6 to about 9, and they'll live in that no problem, it's the changing between levels that is hard for them. So if they're in a pH of 6.5 and they're used to that and everything's stable, all good. If you then change that, for example, it changes to 7. That is a massive task for them to adapt their internal system to a pH, to operate properly at a pH of 7. It's a massive task. It takes a lot of time, but it takes a lot out of them as well. So a lot of resources go into making that adaptation that are no longer being used elsewhere, for example for growth, for immune system, etc. So it takes it out of them to adapt to different pH levels. So you can appreciate, if your pH is continually fluctuating, and within reason over the course of the day it does fluctuate, but outside of those natural fluctuations, it puts a lot of pressure on your fish, as they can't ever become stable and forget about that and concentrate on other things that are continuously changing. And that's why another reason, a myriad of reasons why, but one reason why stocking levels are so important, because the fluctuations in pH, if you stock your pond correctly, they will be very small throughout the day when photosynthesis is occurring. If you stock your pond higher, the wave becomes bigger and bigger, and that puts a massive strain on your koi in itself. But again, I digress. So pH, as your fish and your bacteria have run out of carbonates and they start to reduce the pH, obviously that has a big bearing in itself on your fish. You're having to chase that new level, but it reduces the efficiency of the bacteria in your filter, and it very quickly gets to a point where it is so acidic that it stops any biological activity from going ahead. Your bacteria are killed off. It's the same as switching off your biofilter, just turning it off but carrying on feeding. So you can imagine obviously the ammonia, the subsequent nitrate, the problem that will cause. That is what happens when your koi consume pH because you've run out of KH, and that's referred to as a pH crash. You'll have probably heard of. It is a problem. Koi die from it, no doubt. It's very difficult to get back from it. Takes a lot of time. It is to be avoided. So that's why carbonate and KH is important. You need to keep a level of KH, thus carbonate, in your water, such that your koi and your filter will never use it all up, and you'll never get in the situation where your pH is affected because there is no more carbonate. And so that's what you'll have heard people saying, KH is a buffer, it buffers against pH. That's essentially what they're talking about. What, again, I'll come back full circle. What is the ideal level of KH in your pond? So as I've already said, there's a myriad of things that go into determining how much carbonate is used. How much is in your tap water, so how much you're putting in as well is obviously a factor. A myriad of things. So there is no right one answer to this. And when you see people say over 5, over 6, wherever it may be, that is basically because generally you won't have a system that consumes more than 5 or 6 before it's replenished. So it's a safe level, but as you can appreciate, if you've got a good system that's stocked correctly, you use good food, clean your filters regularly, you could use 0.5. Again, I'm just putting numbers on this and oversimplifying it, but you could use 0.5. Your system could use 0.5. So running at 6 is a massive excess and a massive waste. And if you're buffering by adding carbonate manually, such as bicarbonate of soda, that is creating fluctuation and change and inconsistency. So if you can at all avoid having to add carbonate manually, you would do so. You would always do so. So what I would suggest is, with any system, leave it be and do what you do consistently. If you can, add an auto top up, so a constant trickle in of water for replenishing carbonates, for refreshing your water, rather than doing batch water changes, because again, as you can appreciate, the batch changes add inconsistency, add fluctuation. Do what you do, let everything settle, then measure your KH. Don't just measure it once, measure it at sun up, measure it at sundown, measure it throughout the day, and also know what the level is in your tap water. By doing that, you'll be able to see, when everything's consistent, what amount of KH your system is using. The highest level versus the lowest level is what you're using on a daily basis, and from that you'll be able to judge if you have a safe level. Okay, so if it's only running at 2, everyone will say, oh, you've got to get that up, it's far too low. But if you monitor and you know it fluctuates between 2 and 1.5, then you've got what is it, 300%, 350%, 300%, my maths is, my head's gone, but 300% over capacity there. You're not going to have an issue, and in that situation it's safe to leave it alone and avoid that, introducing that inconsistency. And as I say, if you can do that, you always would. My system here runs at 3, and when I say that, I do often get raised eyebrows. That is generally felt to be low, but I've never seen it go below 2. And I have a constant trickle in. I feed regularly but consistently. I use Hikari wheat germ, which is a good quality food. flush my filters every day. It doesn't fluctuate. I'm more than comfortable with that, and it's completely safe. Now, one thing I would say, if you do similar, you find that you're at 3, whatever it may be, you don't, with consistency, without doing anything manually to raise it, it's stable and you're happy. That only applies until something changes. So if you add another fish, then you will add an extra load on your carbonate level. You'll need more carbonate, because with an extra fish using carbonates also comes more food, and with that comes more bigger bacteria colony to cope with the extra food. So changes, if you go from a batch water change to a trickle in, trickle out, that's a change that will impact carbonate use. A new filter system, change of food, a big increase in feeding or decrease, etc. So lots of different things will impact that, but as long as you keep everything as consistent as possible and you know where you're at, then you can manage that. So there isn't a one answer to the question, what is the ideal level of KH? There are a lot of factors, but hopefully that gives you a better understanding of what exactly it's there for and what it does, and how you can look at your system specifically with a view to determining if you need to intervene. And as I say, if you can avoid intervening, you always would. Bicarbonate is the way to bring it up if you need to, but again, it's a batch process, so your carbonate comes up when you put it in, and then it drops, and then it comes up, then it drops. There's, without a sort of a dosing pump and some kind of continual system to feed tiny amounts, you're always going to create that fluctuation and inconsistency that you want to avoid. So hopefully that was useful. As I say, it was just a concise, just focusing in on that bit of information based on the fact that I get asked the question a lot. But there's a lot of other videos out there with a lot more detail, a lot more information on my channel. Do check them out if you haven't already. If it was useful, do give me a thumbs up, and do subscribe to the channel if you want to catch any future videos. I've got a lot of stuff coming up, got some good videos in the pipeline, so watch out for those. As ever, thank you for watching, and look after yourself.